mic.
I got to speak to the mic?
Yes. There we go.
Okay. I do have butterflies. All right. So what I'm going to need you to do is like help me to release these butterflies. Okay. So you know, if I say power to the people.
All power to the people.
That's what you're going to say back, right? Power to the people.
Power to the people.
Some of them left out. Just try it one more time. Not all of them out. There's some stuff in the corner. I tell stories to my children now, so I can do these type of things. Power to the people.
Power to the people.
That's right. All power to the people. We didn't say to the politicians. We didn't say to the preachers. We didn't say to any authority. We said to the people. And I also say through the people. You know, because it really comes through us. You know, we don't need no, authorities. We don't need no people above us telling us what to do or being in positions to dictate the use of the resources that we need to be able to live good material lives, or to be able to just make us so miserable we can't even be spiritually happy. You know, so it is really the people, the people, the people. So you know a little bit about my background, so I don't have to get into that. What I really want to get into, I make notes sometimes, but it's like I never really follow them, but I think this time I do to some degree. I think I want to talk about the state, I can't say the state of the anarchist movement, can you? Okay. Is that right?
Well, state can mean more than one thing.
It can mean more than one thing, thank you so much. It's a prize for you at the But I do, and the reason I do it, which is why when Sky contacted me and asked me to do it, is because we both were talking about like some of the things going on in the anarchist movement and the anarchist people of color spaces, locally and around this brain of the empire called the United States. And sometimes the things you hear are very disheartening. So I know that one of the things I wanted to get into was like what's going on as far as I can see, and why I think we need to really step back, look at it, pull it together, and figure out how we can get back into a position to seize that moment that I think that we had to a certain extent in the 90s, in the early 2000s, at least around that period. But for me, there's certain understandings that have to come with that. So I'm asking you, like I may say some things you don't agree with, but I want you to just hear it. I want us to remember where we're at, just physically where we're at first. So before we even be anarchists, just to recognize where we're at first. We're on Turtle Island. Okay. How did we become the United States or North and South Americas is what we have to remember. So that it informs the kind of anarchisms that we act out of, that we work from. We also have to keep in mind that there was a middle passage of stolen Africans. We have to remember that happened for several centuries as well. And what became the United States of America. And it has to inform our anarchism. We have to remember that Mexico was also, had land stolen from them in war from the United States. And we have the nerve now to just not be critical of the news when they tell you who's climbing over the wall, that wall they built along that West Coast borders and stuff. This land is stolen. If we are going to seize that moment again as anarchists, we cannot do it without recognizing some of the things that went into making America. Because when we do ignore it, we perpetuate the white supremacy that made America America, that put indigenous folks on reservations, that ran African folks through plantations up until the present day prison industrial complex, which for me extends into the ghettos and other areas where we live, because they have become so much under surveillance and confinement with all the latest technologies. How do we bring what has been our potential to such a situation and not ignore that? So that if we are syndicalists, insurrectionists, if we, whatever the tendency we are, we want to save the trees, unpollute the waters, if we want to whatever, how do we do that in a way that honors the original inhabitants of this land, that recognizes what it did and still does to African people, what it still does to brown folks, what it does to poor folks and folks of other lower classes? Then I think we have the potential to make our anarchisms relevant. Then I think we have a chance to do that. But when we proceed to act as if none of that matters, then we create these spaces of white supremacy even as anarchists. And it's ironic that even today we can confront the native people, whatever the people. I mean, we can confront that because it's kind of easy. Because we say, well, they're racist, but not recognize how our uncritical anarchisms have kept our spaces either white or very miserable for folks who are not white, not wanting to be in there. So let's look at what we do. Let's look at what we do deeply. I think that anti-authoritarian anarchism, I think they held and still hold so much promise for this land that we're on, because we're saying we need to unshackle ourselves in so many different ways, that not only the physical shackles, but also the mental and the spiritual shackles, and the ways we shackle each other that have been ingrained in us from this system. So the ways that we treat each other, male, female, brown, white, where you're from, how you speak, how we do within our movements, is sometimes not put in a perspective as, we're perpetuating the very systems that we want to get rid of. Some of the things that I learned that made me even want to move in this direction was that I had readings, whether it's Kropotkin and all the other ones, and I'm really not the type to really put them on pedestals. They're just human beings. They put some thoughts out, whether it's Emma Goldman, whoever. They put some out that really gave me ways of seeing societies we could create that could move beyond the oppressions that we knew and understood. But then when I read the feminisms, and then I read some of the psychologies of oppression, I said, man, this is much deeper than we thought. It gave me a chance to see mistakes we made in the Panther Party, and the Black Liberation Army, and the other movements back then, that we weakened ourselves by perpetuating, and not so much the FBI or the state versions of the FBI, they just had a chance to feed into some of the poisons we were already acting out of. How do you think it feels for someone, me, who is almost 60 now, to see this repeat itself over and over again from people who I know intentions are well or good, but will do similar things that we did back then to hurt each other, because we don't want to look at how deep the oppressions are. If our anarchisms are not addressing them issues, we have to expand them anarchisms. We cannot talk about class struggle as if this is just a class war, as if folks of color, we don't even matter. Are we workers or not? The IWW has an excellent opportunity at this very moment to build support for the Free Alabama movement. Has anybody ever heard of that? Right now, I happen to have been on a conference call just to help kind of explore some ideas. But the first point I had to bring up on this call was that IWW doesn't have a good history with dealing with race. So if they have reached out to you, which these are black people locked up in Alabama, if they reached out to you for support, the first thing you're going to have to do is to recognize some of your own limitations so that you can get them the most that you have to give. Do not deal with them as just that they're class warriors or whatever, because they can go on strike. These is African, basically African people who have been in this situation from day one in what we know as the United States. If you're going into their communities, you need to know something about our struggles. You cannot just give them something on what the Wobblies did in Philadelphia, or you cannot just give them something on Lucy Parsons or whatever and feel like the job is done. You must expand that and go into areas that will even start to make you feel a little uneasy, because it's going to challenge some of the things that you have been doing kind of unconsciously to perpetuate racism. If you were lifestyle, if you were from those movements that are really trying to get people to focus on what happens to animals, you gotta look at what indigenous folks have been doing that's a part of their lifestyle, period. To focus on the animals in the environment and not come up with this as if it is a brand new idea, but to recognize that there are some other places that have been always doing that, but you didn't quite see it. To reach out to them to build alliances also means that you have to recognize why you never saw it. Therefore, you don't have to go through a lot of the splits and the dissensions and the harms that we do to each other by not facing them issues. If we can do that, there is potential that our anarchisms, our anti-authoritarianisms can begin to be very relevant. Very relevant. I had one experience just in terms of trying to get my own perspective to expand in reading books on queer theory. And how that happened to me was that one of my coworkers, who was also a very close friend of mine, who's queer, heard me make a really messed up statement. And so she gives me this book, Queer Theory. She says, read it. She challenges me. So I take the book. As I know I told the story some other places, but I'm on the subway. This is while I'm living in New York. I'm on the subway. And even the way I read the book, my body language tells you I'm struggling. Because I usually hold the book up like this. Now I'm holding the book down. I don't want people to see the cover. But this is my friend. And she told me I said some things that really hurt her. I didn't mean it. So as a start, here, read this. And then we'll talk about it. Eventually, as days went on, the book came up, and I finished the book, and we had conversations, and I was able to see that some of my own oppressive ways was harming people who I am close to. I have to be willing to expand my anarchism, my view of life, because that's really what it is, my lifestyle, so that as we build to bring this empire down, I am helping to nurture good, loving, caring relationships with those closest to me, even when it means that I got to face my own shit. The promise is there, the potential is there, if I want to take that risk. And I'm saying that's the same challenge that I feel you have to face right now with what the state of our anarchist movement is, what the state of anarchist people of color is that when there are things that are preventing us to be being caring and loving, and we realize it's some of our own shit, you got to figure out what it is and try to deal with that. Otherwise, we perpetuate smaller levels oppression that feed into the large systems of oppression. Where we at today is just like, this is not 10 years ago, or this is when the Republican convention was in Philadelphia. There's a few people from Philadelphia here, right? Are you still here? In the back. When we did the shutdown of the Republican convention, what was so inspiring to me was that the anarchists definitely took a strong role. And they had this thing called the Spokes Council. Do y'all remember that? But anyhow, never heard of it before. But it was a way to include voices that had been historically excluded and struggled. And the folks who put it together was white folks, basically white anarchists. But when we came there from New York, Buffalo, met up with the folks of color in Philly who was participating, right away, it was like, they got this great Spokes Council, we're nowhere in there. So here we march into the Spokes Council and take our place. And it is a little upsetting for some people. But struggle means upsetting things sometimes if you're going to work to get to a better place. After we worked that out and people had to go through their emotional things and whatever that was, that Spokes Council began to work. And we felt like we could fully participate in the strategies and the tactics of shutting this convention down. For me to see that meant that we had to be open to change. But we had to be open also to sometimes the little smaller terrors that kind of curse through your body when you know that the change means you got to let go of some things in you that have kept you perpetuating some of the very oppressions you have been wanting to get rid of. But that showed me that there is potential in anarchist creativity and coming up with new ideas to make a movement happen, to make a movement that could transform the world. So those are the kind of actions. So you had Seattle, then you had the Zapatista uprising, and then you had people that seem to have been coming together to present new ways of struggling. And if they didn't say anarchist, they were all right with anti-authoritarian. And some didn't want any of them titles, but they was presenting ways of seeing life and struggle on more horizontal terms. They were giving folks an opportunity to do it different. Instead of going into another hierarchical group, whether it was RCP, whether it was the Trotskyist group, even one of the nationalist groups, that you know that you had to kind of find your place, and especially if you was a woman or if you was queer, you could forget it. Because I know the nationalist groups back then was like, you're queer, you're not even coming space. Here were people that were saying, well, we have other spaces. Let's try to create those spaces and make it happen. That also means that the vision of this world we're trying to create is making space for people who have been excluded. And it begins to look so much richer, complex in really great ways, because it shows that diversity is really a great thing. To create this world, like the Zapatistas say, a world where other worlds exist, this is a real possibility. To be able to see means we can do it. In the last 5-10 years, on my notes I have the fall, and then I have the interference, right? It feels to me, and I'm just taking ownership of that, just feels to me, that we have been losing that ground rapidly. Whether it shows in the attendance of the New York Anarchist Bookfair, other book fairs, whether it's the people in general who come, or whether it's people of color whose attendance dwindles, or whether what happened with Occupy Wall Street all over, when it got to like, where the black folks, where the folks of color, why aren't they there? Oh no, we're all 99%, It seems like we have been losing that ground because we dare not step up to the challenge. Especially when the challenge means the things that we have been holding on to that maybe has made our life relevant on other levels for years, but it don't make it relevant for struggle that's going to change the world. You have to let go of. And if you can't do it on your own, do it within your circles. That's what a community is really good for. I mean, we are people who are not so hung up on organization that, we forget community. That gives us that space to not only make mistakes, but to break down and cry because it might allow us to actually come through. To see that light in the tunnel come through to something new in yourself and that you're able to give to others, So what it seems like has been happening is so much internal stuff. Charges. You're this, you did that. You take this side, you take that side. You was my friend, you're not my friend. You're my comrade, you're not my comrade anymore. You're a pig. I say jokingly, somewhat seriously, not only do I think the FBI sits back and laugh, but I think the heads of the FBI who have to deal with paying their agents be like, y'all ain't doing no work, y'all about to get fired. Because the anarchists are really destroying themselves. Y'all, listen, you want to get paid, you got to do some more. We're doing it for them because we have not learned how to be more caring and accountable in our collectivity or in the ways that we relate to each other. We have not yet integrated ways to deal with the internalized oppressions that we all suffer from. Pain that we carry, open wounds that we carry. Whether dealing with the ways that we came up with the parental situation, the family situation, or whether we were sent to reform school a lot of times and got beat down in there, whether our spirits got beat down in the school systems, it don't matter. We carry a lot, and we cannot do this revolution small unless we are working simultaneously to deal with the stuff that we carry. So we're losing, and we will continue to lose until we figure out how to create the kind of community space within our circles that help us to deal with the pains that we carry, or what Frantz Fanon, talked about in terms of that colonized mentality. That looks one way for one group, a different way for another group. How that might look for black people may not be the same way it looks for indigenous folks, may not be the same way for white folks whose parents came here as immigrants. But we surely better figure it out, because the more that we carry and act out of these many oppressions, these micro-oppressions, the more we destroy our potential. And in this world, when we live in a rape culture, in a violent culture, in a culture that just systematically destroys people's identities, you know, it can only make us act out worse with each other, and still at the same time stop this really great rhetoric, stop great visions. It cannot continue to happen. So at 60, man, I can be an elder now. And so I speak from that, right? I want to speak as that elder. My responsibility is to at least give it to you the way I really feel it is, and for you to take it for whatever it is worth. We went through a lot of changes from the 60s. You have to imagine, as a painter, we felt we could change the world. At the same time that we're getting shot down, we're getting run out of the country, we're getting locked up, we're losing family, friends, associates, support. Yet, that vision of this free society, you know, with the influence of socialists and communists and anarchist ideas, like, yo, man, we can do this. But the system still won. It took me a long time to admit that. What I try to let folks know today is that you gotta have things that's going to hold you together in these rough times, or to hold you together even when we have to suffer defeats. It doesn't have to be the final defeat, but something has got to hold you together. Whatever the belief system is, something has got to hold you together through rough times, but the system puts a lot of hits on you, on us, every day. Whether that system is the physical ones of folks in uniforms, or sometimes when the system is ways that we act out on each other. You know, if you're not, if you don't have certain belief systems and spiritualities that say, listen, it's going to be okay, God got your back, or the Spirit got your back, or your ancestors are with you, you may tend to crumble. Or if your relationships in your circles are not authentic, you will not know how to help someone who is breaking down right in front of you. You will not know what to do. And what some people do is just back up, you know, instead of trying to figure out some other way to help that person find somebody who has the skills. We just let that person fall by the wayside. Next thing you know, they're in some same asylum somewhere, you know, forgotten. So we have to decide that to bring this empire down, to love ourselves, to create the world we want, we have to really live it now. But living it now means also figuring out how to get rid of that monster, that thirst within us as well. If we can do that, there's nothing that can stop us. There's nothing that can stop us. I mean, the years I went to prison, enough. Scott mentioned, 11 years. All told, about 14. What does that compare with 40? With 40. What does that compare with 40 with someone who's done 40 in isolation? Or 30 in isolation? Nothing. What keeps them going? What keeps political prisoners going who we don't even support and who still believe in us? I want you to think of that. When you talk about me, I don't know about me. But there's a bunch of others. There's others who are gone. We got one who might be going Monday. Am I right? She's going into hell. How can we be there for them? Because most of the ones have been there 20, 30, 40 years. Miraculously, still optimistic about a revolution. I ain't saying they're anarchists, but it really don't matter. They still think that we can bring this thing down and change the world. Under the most horrific conditions. Some without sunlight. Some without being able to go outside. Some with a constant beam of light on and everything. Getting food shoved through the hole. Getting the mail regulated. Having their connections with people outside curtailed in the most extreme manners. Yet, their belief keeps them sane as much as possible. When you have that, there's no way that we can really lose. But they're doing that even though we don't really support them. The work that, like with this Jericho or the Leonard Peltier Committee or the Anarchist Black Crosses, the work that we do, we don't get that support. We can't even get it posted on the agenda. But we tell people it is key that you support them because one, Yuri Kochiyama calls them the heartbeat of our movement. They're the ones that lay the ground for the things that you're doing now. And most of us don't even know about it. But they're the ones who also say, like I'm trying to tell you, that the spirit of the people is still greater than man's technology. That if we can reach that part and begin to work that change at the same time we're organizing, that we're fighting, we can change ourselves and actually change the world. I want you to consider that like you have never considered anything else. Because what I still feel was the real demise, I'm not going to say the real demise, part of the demise of the Panthers and others was our inability to deal with a lot of our own internalized oppression. Our own sexisms, our own ageisms, our own inability to even be truly happy at the same time that we're trying to organize. Some of it was just mechanical, like we need to do this. But some people could not even shake off their drinking abilities or their drug abilities. They're still trying to be relevant. We have to figure out what we need to do today. We need to know how we're going to make New York City Anarchist Bookfair successful next year as well. Not only because it needs to be, but this kind of space where we can socialize like this, where we can get the materials we want and we can listen to the speakers we think are relevant and resonate relevant. It needs to happen. But it has to continually happen from good principles and a good heart. This is what if Lenny was here now, this is basically what he'd be telling me. It's because this folks keep it pretty simple. Where's your heart? Not the macho heart, where's your caring heart? That cares about you, your neighbor, the birds, the trees, the rocks, the water. Who talks like that? But it's the kind of things we need to hear if we're going to ground ourselves in the greatest vision of a new society that we can imagine. That includes all things, all. So the last thing I want to say is we have a challenge. The challenge is can we be more than we are right now? Can we do it in the best ways that we can? Can we be caring about the ways that we are with each other? Can we expand our anarchism out of those those things that may have been relevant 100, 200 years ago, can we make our work relevant in communities that really need us right now, and we needing them? These other communities, people in these communities who really impacted, we need them right now. And for that to happen in a mutual, respectful way, so that we will no longer think that we are just so privileged, we got all this great information we need. What the Zapatistas found out was that the ones that came from the university was that all that highfalutin philosophy, theory, and ideology that they was bringing meant nothing to Mayan folks that already had their own and were willing to share it and not have to give it up because someone was coming with a PhD and said, well, you know, this is the way they did it in China. You know, Mayans were like, well, this is the way we're going to do it here. Now, if you got something to offer, put it on the table. But if not, then, you know, this is probably not going to work. So we have things that we think can be helpful to communities who are really oppressed, depressed. Figure out the ways that we can get it, and also be open to the change that it can actually bring to us at the same time, allow us to continue to grow. Empire must come down. George Jackson said, stick a blade in his throat. I hope that's not too graphic. I want to see it come down there. Okay, Lord White told me today, Ashanti, it ain't going to happen in my lifetime. So, but be all right that at least the process has started. And I'm like, okay, Lord, you're a little older than me. I got to accept it. I'm telling you now, make it happen. So that this victory is not theirs. The victory is ours.